The House of the Wolfings. Chapter 18. Tidings brought to the Weinberg. Now it must be told of Otter and they of the Weinberg how they had the tidings of the overthrow of the Romans on the ridge, and that Egil had left them on his way to Wolfstead. They were joyful of the tale, as was like to be, but eager also to strike their stroke at the foemen, and in that mood they abode fresh tidings. It has been told how Otter had sent the Barings and the Wormings to the aid of Thiodolf and his folk, and these two were great kindreds, and they being gone, there abode with Otter, one man with another, thralls and freemen, scant 3,000 men. Of these many were bowmen good to fight from behind a wall or fence or some such cover, but scarce meet to withstand a shock in the open field. However, it was deemed at this time in the Weinberg that Thiodolf and his men would soon return to them, and in any case, they said, he lay between the Romans and the Mark, so that they had but little doubt. Or rather they feared that the Romans might draw back from the Mark before they could be met in battle again, for as aforesaid they were eager for the fray. Now it was in the cool of the evening 2 days after the battle on the ridge, that the men, both freemen and thralls, had been disporting themselves in the plain ground without the burg in casting the spear and putting the stone and running races afoot and horseback. And now close on sunset 3 young men, 2 of the Laxings and 1 of the Shieldings, and a grey old thrall of that same house were shooting a match with the bow, driving their shafts at a Russian roundel hung on a pole which the old thrall had dight. Men were peaceful and happy, for the time was fair and calm, and, as aforesaid, they dreaded not the Roman host any more than if they were gods dwelling in God-home. The shooters were deft men, and they of the burg were curious to note their deftness, and many were breathed with the games wherein they had striven, and thought it good to rest and look on the new sport, so they sat and stood on the grass about the shooters on 3 sides. And the mead-horn went briskly from man to man, for there was no lack of meat and drink in the burg, whereas the kindreds that lay nighest to it had brought in abundant provision, and women of the kindreds had come to them. And not a few were there scattered up and down among the carles. Now the shielding man, Gearbald by name, had just loosed at the mark, and had shot straight and smitten the roundel in the midst, and a shout went up from the onlookers thereat, but that shout was, as it were, lined with another, and a cry that a messenger was riding toward the burg, thereat most men looked round toward the wood, because their minds were set on fresh tidings from Thiodolf's company, but as it happened it was from the north and the side toward Midmark that they on the outside of the throng had seen the rider coming, and presently the word went from man to man that so it was, and that the newcomer was a young man on a grey horse, and would speedily be amongst them, so they wondered what the tidings might be. But yet they did not break up the throng, but abode in their places that they might receive the messenger more orderly, and as the rider drew near, those who were nighest to him perceived that it was a woman. So men made way before the grey horse and its rider, and the horse was much spent and travel-worn. So the woman rode right into the ring of warriors and drew rein there, and lighted down slowly and painfully, and when she was on the ground could scarce stand for stiffness, and 2 or 3 of the swains drew near her to help her, and knew her at once for Hroshild of the Wolfings, for she was well known as a doughty woman. Then she said, "Bring me to Otter the Warduke, or bring him hither to me, which were best, since so many men are gathered together, and meanwhile give me to drink, for I am thirsty and weary." So while one went for Otter, another reached to her the mead-horn, and she had scarce done her draught ere Otter was there, for they had found him at the gate of the burg. He had many a time been in the Wolfing hall, so he knew her at once, and said, "Hail, Hroshild! How farest thou?" She said, "I fare as the bearer of evil tidings. Bid thy folk do on their war gear and saddle their horses, and make no delay, for now presently shall the Roman host be in Midmark." Then cried Otter, "Blow up the war-horn. Get ye all to your weapons, and be ready to leap on your horses, and come ye to the thing in good order kindred by kindred. Later on ye shall hear Hroshild's story as she shall tell it to me." Therewith he led her to a grassy knoll that was hard by, and set her down thereon, and himself beside her, and said, "Speak now, damsel, and fear not. For now shall one fate go over us all, either to live together or die together as the free children of Tyr, and friends of the Almighty God of the earth. How camest thou to meet the Romans and know their ways, and to live thereafter?" She said, thus it was, the Hallson bethought her how that the eastern ways into Midmark that bring a man to the thicket behind the roof of the Barings are nowise hard, even for an host, so she sent 10 women, and me the 11th to the Baring dwelling and the road through the thicket aforesaid, and we were to take of the Baring stay-at-homes whomso we would that were handy, and then all we to watch the ways for fear of the Romans. And methinks she has had some vision of their ways, though mayhap not altogether clear. Anyhow we came to the Baring dwellings, and they gave us of their folk 8 doughty women and 2 lightfoot lads, and so we were 21 in all. So then we did as the Hallson bade us, and ordained a chain of watchers far up into the waste. And these were to sound a point of war upon their horns each to each till the sound thereof should come to us who lay with our horses hoppled ready beside us in the fair plain of the mark outside the thicket. To be short, the horns waked us up in the midst of yesternight, and of the watches also came to us the last, which had heard the sound amidst the thicket, and said that it was certainly the sound of the Goth's horn, and the note agreed on. Therefore I sent a messenger at once to the Wolfing roof to say what was toward, but to thee I would not ride until I had made sure of the tidings, so I waited a while, and then rode into the wild wood, and a long tale I might make both of the waiting and the riding. Had I time there too, but this is the end of it, that going warily a little past where the thicket thinneth and the road in death, I came on 3 of those watches or links in the chain we had made, and half of another watch or link. That is to say 6 women who were come together after having blown their horns and fled, though they should rather have abided in some lurking place to sb whatever might come that way, and 1 other woman who had been one of the watch much further off, and had spoken with the furthest of all, which one had seen the faring of the Roman host, and that it was very great, and no mere band of pillagers or of scouts. And, said this fleer, who was indeed half wild with fear, that while they were talking together, came the Romans upon them, and saw them, and a band of Romans beat the wood for them when they fled, and she, the fleer, was at point to be taken, and saw 2 taken indeed, and haled off by the Roman scourers of the wood. But she escaped, and so came to the others on the skirts of the thicket, having left of her skin and blood on many a thorn bush and rock by the way. Now when I heard this, I bade this fleer get her home to the bearings as swiftly as she might, and tell her tale, and she went away trembling, and scarce knowing whether her feet were on earth or on water or on fire, but belike failed not to come there, as no Romans were before her. But for the others I sent one to go straight to Wulfstead on the heels of the first messenger, to tell the Hallson what had befallen, and other 5 I set to lurk in the thicket, whereas none could lightly lay hands on them, and when they had new tidings, to flee to Wulfstead as occasion might serve them, and for myself I tarried not, but rode on the spur to tell thee hereof. But my last word to thee, Otter, is that by the Hallsons bidding the bearings will not abide fire and steel at their own stead, but when they hear true tidings of the Romans being hard at hand, will take with them all that is not too hot or too heavy to carry, and go their ways unto Wulfstead, and the tidings will go up and down the mark on both sides of the water, so that whatever is of avail for defense will gather there at our dwelling, and if we fall, goodly shall be the how heaped over us, even if ye come not in time. Now have I told thee what I needs must, and there is no need to question me more, for thou hast it all, do thou what thou hast to do. With that word she cast herself down on the grass by the mount side, and was presently asleep, for she was very weary. But all the time she had been telling her tale had the horn been sounding, and there were now a many warriors gathered and more coming in every moment, so Otter stood up on the mound after he had bidden a man of his house to bring him his horse and war gear, and abided a little, till, as might be said, the whole host was gathered. Then he bade cry silence, and spake. Sons of Tyr, now hath an host of the Romans gotten into the mark, a mighty host, but not so mighty that it may not be met. Few words are best. Let the steerings, who are not many, but are men well tried in war and wisdom, abide in the burg along with the fighting thralls, but let the burg be broken up and moved from the place, and let its warders wend towards Midmark, but warily and without haste, and each night let them make the Waingarth and keep good watch. But know ye that the Romans shall fall with all their power on the Wolfing dwellings, deeming that when they have that, they shall have all that is ours with ourselves also. For there is the Hallson under the great roof, and there hath Thiodulf, our war-duke, his dwelling place. Therefore shall all of us, save those that abide with the wains, take horse, and ride without delay, and cross the water at Battleford, so that we may fall upon the foe before they come west of the water, for as ye know there is but one ford whereby a man wending straight from the bearings may cross Mirkwood water, and it is like that the foe will tarry at the bearings stead long enough to burn and pillage it. So do ye order yourselves according to your kindreds, and let the shieldings lead. Make no more delay. But for me I will now send a messenger to Thiodulf to tell him of the tidings, and then speedily shall he be with us. Gearbald, I see thee, come hither. Now Gearbald stood amidst the shieldings, and when Otter had spoken, he came forth bestriding a white horse, and with his bow slung at his back. Said Otter, Gearbald, thou shalt ride at once through the wood, and find Thiodulf, and tell him the tidings, and that in no wise he follow the Roman fleers away from the mark, nor to heed anything but the trail of the foemen through the southeastern heats of Mirkwood. Whether other Romans follow him or not, whatever happens, let him lead the Goths by that road, which for him is the shortest, towards the defense of the Wolfing dwellings. Lo thou, my ring for a token. Take it and depart in haste. Yet first take thy fellow Vigeland the woodman with thee, lest if perchance one fall, the other may bear the message. Tarry not, nor rest till thy word be said. Then turned Gearball to find Vigland, who was anigh to him, and he took the ring, and the twain went their ways without more ado, and rode into the wildwood. But about the Wainburg was there plenteous stir of men till all was ordered for the departure of the host, which was no long while, for there was nothing to do but on with the war gear and up unto the horse. Forth then they went duly ordered in their kindreds towards the head of the upper mark, riding as swiftly as they might without breaking their array.